See you all here. I guess we should just go into introductions then. My name is Significant Otter, or John Culp. I write a lot of sort of slice of life-ish fiction, less like true sort of direct literary slice of life, but I also enjoy those stories a lot. And pass it on.
So, significant otter, like significant, is there like an insignificant otter?
Sea otters.
Oh, wait, what?
All other otters.
Wow, okay.
Yeah, I get that a lot from otter people.
Mm-hmm.
Okay then. All right, so, hi, I'm Maggie. No.
That was not a
Good
sentence,
start.
Maggie.
Good start. Okay, so it would be my best-selling series if it had not been for all the promotions I ran recently for the other series, is Slice of Life. And I enjoy writing it, and I love reading it, so I guess that's why I'm here. Go for it.
Hi, I'm Skunk Bomb. I've written a few stories in the furry fandom, including my most recent story, which is published in Claw, which is a female-female erotica anthology, which unfortunately is sold out in Fur Planet, but you can still buy it on their website.
All right. Okay.
All right. I forgot publication credits. I'm an Arcana, which you can buy online. Thurston Howell Pub. I'm also going to be in the upcoming Fang, which Skunk is also going to be in. It's exciting. Sorry.
No,
Go
that's
ahead.
awesome. That's awesome. All right, so I guess, how are we doing this?
I don't know. I didn't make plans, even though I'm like the consummate planner. I guess let's start with talking about what slice of life is, because there's often confusions about like the definition of it and about what really constitutes slice of life. People hear slice of life and you might think slice of life anime, which is really kind of just a everyday dramas and difficulties and so forth. But also a lot of time that kind of slice of life doesn't really fit into the real the literary definition of it, which is sort of fiction that encapsulates a moment that is sort of that doesn't really shine a light on the overarching narrative. Fiction about the moment itself. So you have this. So for example. I'm trying to recall my creative writing fiction classes because if you ever take a creative writing fiction class, half the things you'll read are slice of life, non-narrative pieces of fiction.
That's true.
But a lot of literary fiction that you'll find in short story form tends to be about those moments and about finding deeper meaning in those moments without regard to the larger narrative.
Right. I sometimes hear that like slice of life is a genre where like nothing happens,
Oh, God.
or like
Nothing happens.
it's like, and it's about nothing. But really, like, I feel like the misconception is that the story seems to be less focused. It's not as plot focused. I feel like it's more character focused, which is what sort of drew me to the genre, because I tend to focus more on characters when I write a story.
Awesome. I think you covered it. I got nothing.
All right. You were talking about character focus, and it can be dangerous when you're considering slice of life. Well, not to talk about like character focus, because a lot of times when you refer to the term character focus, and I know what you were meaning there, a lot of the times you're talking about character arcs. And there's the anime slice of life, or the slice of life novel, what's called slice of life, as like a genre term, where you have like an everyday life that has subtle character arcs and subtle plot arcs, but is really about these things happening throughout their life and showcasing their life. However, this isn't the same as like the literary definition of slice of life, where a character arc sort of excludes it from the category, because that slice of life is just sort of about a moment, a thing that happens, and no narrative, where a character arc is still a narrative. However, I don't like writing that as much. It can be fun for fiction classes, but I tend to find yes, but I tend to find myself more drawn towards like the novelish slice of life, or the that kind of structure where you get to see the character operating in an environment and really like dealing with everyday struggles in ways that reveal things about themselves.
Yep. That's good.
Yeah. I feel like slice of life is like super popular for like YA books, like John Green and the Rainbow Rowell. Though I do feel like, not sure if I've read enough of them myself, but I feel like slice of life is something that can be encompassed in other genres, say like sci-fi and fantasy, the daily life of just ordinary people in those worlds, even if the worlds are fantastical. Like, sure, there's of course stories where like you have to save the world or save your country from like this giant dragon monster, but like what's happening with like Dave the farmer? Like he's probably getting messed up by like.
A lot of science fiction is about you change one thing or you adjust something slightly and see how it alters the human condition or human behavior. So it really is like the ideal kind of setting. Or fantasy is the same thing, but instead it sort of changes it into a different sort of set of alterations that happen to this setting to reveal things about human behavior. I think that Ursula Le Guin has a lot of really strong short stories that are about like human struggles and like character struggles that are relatable things, framed through like a science fiction setting.
Right. Yes. Wizard of Earthsea, correct?
That as well. The one that I was thinking of when I said that was 4 Ways to Forgiveness,
Oh,
which I
okay.
really like the verse.
I never heard that one.
It's good. It's really good.
Don't you also have a lot of slice of life moments within other genre fictions? I mean, you look at the show Firefly. Some of it is not plot related. It's just those characters interacting, and usually they're interacting on a very casual level.
It's interesting. I don't know if I consider that slice of life. It is revealing moments, but a lot of those sort of moments that you're talking about are trying to establish character for a narrative. They're taking a moment and using a light conversation to reveal something about the character that's going to be used in the arc of the character to progress the story or to progress the narrative. And while it's really cool, if you had separated that slice out, anonymized the content, and then just looked at that moment, that's sort of a very slice of life thing to do. That's kind of like the literary slice of life.
Which I'm pretty sure almost no one here has read. Like,
I've-
unless you remember your English classes.
Yes.
Does anyone remember reading true literary slice of life stuff besides?
So mice and men count?
No.
No.
Okay, so
The thing is, honestly, it can be interesting to do it once in a while, but slice of life, the true literary slice of life, the fact that it doesn't incorporate a narrative, and the fact that it doesn't incorporate any real character arc or plot arc makes it very difficult to approach, especially from like a storytelling perspective. So a lot of times when you're looking at slice of life in fiction, you're talking about a sort of subset of like modern day fiction where you have sort of understated arcs. You have everything is driven around real or everyday situations and struggles that are relatable. Go ahead. You got some, oh, you know, no, but relatable struggles and things to that encapsulate sort of human progression through society or through your life.
how's our audience doing here? Go ahead.
I was gonna ask a question. But,
Yes, please.
you keep repeating the word narrative, no narrative, or something like that. Is that like the perspective of the novel is like no narrative is like they're talking like everyone's perspective, or I know like first and third perspective where it's like I or your or something like that.
He means there's no plot.
Yeah, conflict structures. I'm
Oh,
talk-
yay! You get to talk about it. Go for it.
So what I'm talking about are, if you've ever taken an English class that had you write some kind of short story or some kind of fiction, you've seen like I forget what they call the introduction, the rising action, the climax, the falling action, and the exposition.
The denouement.
Yes. Yeah. The This is the
Maggie's favorite part of the book.
yeah, the denouement. This structure is the structure of some kind of arc for conflict, where things get steadily more tense, more intense, and then suddenly a thing happens that causes everything to like suddenly change to a point where after it everything is falling in tension until it finally resolves. This happens in plot. This happens in character. Almost it may like change the length of the rising action or the falling action. There may be spikes in it with miniature climax points, but throughout any real arc of tension or plot character that you have in a story, that's what's going to be present. So when we're talking about a story without a narrative, we're talking about a story that doesn't involve the rising action, the climax, the falling action. It may be at a point where where an overarching narrative might have had a piece of rising action or might have been a climax, but you get no other piece of it, and you just see that moment, irregardless, or which is a good word. Thank you. Regardless of the surrounding narrative, the structure that would be around it.
Right. It has no plot.
Right. Yes.
Right. Go ahead.
So would like, on example, would Agretsuko technically be slice of life?
Would what?
Agretsuko.
Each episode has its own arc of development. Normally, I've only seen 2 episodes of it, and then it wasn't my thing. But I've seen 2 episodes of it. At the start of each episode, the character has a problem. Over the course of the episode, the character talks to their friends about their problem and tries to figure out a solution for it. They try a solution, fail the solution, then figure out some way to fix it, and or at least deal with it, and the problem is mostly better. This itself is a conflict arc. Though the Agretsuko, I speak Japanese. Agretsuko is Agretsuko is what is like the Japanese slice of life, though, and it's a novel style slice of life where you still have the structure, but it's understated, and it's something where the focus is on like these life daily life situations.
Which is the kind of slice of life that I think we're all here for.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So when we're talking about narrative slice of life, we're sort of setting up a wall so that you know like what these 2 things are that we're talking about, and they don't get confused. Because they do very often get confused, and you end up in arguments of this is slice of life, no, this is slice of life, no, you're doing it wrong, and both are fine and both are right, but they're just different kinds of right.
Yeah. But we mostly like the kind that has like a story involved.
Yes.
Not to diss literary fiction, but
Yeah.
it's a niche audience, right?
Right. I'm happy to diss literary fiction, but go ahead.
It has its moments. Everything has its moments.
It's true.
All right.
It is only its moments.
Oh, it was beautiful. And ow, no, bad. Okay, do we have any other questions? I'm curious. Well, first you, then you. Great.
So pretty much, it's like minimal plot. It's mainly focused on the person and the daily things they go through.
Mm-hmm.
So say a slice of life of a person going to a town that's totally different than what she's used to for the first time and finding out herself, like finding out
Sounds
her
about right.
purpose in life, her love life, stuff like that.
That actually has the a term, the boy out of water, or like the fish out of water.
Fish out of
The,
That's not-
there's a boy something, and then there's also the fish out of water. And I'm
Boy
like,
meets girl, is that what you're thinking of?
No,
Boy
no,
meets fish.
Boy meets fish.
Out of water.
No.
This is a free con.
Boy should not
Close.
be fish. I think fish out of water is
John, you're an otter. You should have known it was fish.
fish out of water assumes that you stay out of the fish stays out of the water though. I think you have this nice beautiful thing where they figure out where they belong, and that sounds nice. But yeah, that sounds like what was your slice of life about?
The one in plot that I mentioned? The story involved two college students. One of them is a tutor, and she's tutoring another classmate of hers in math, or else the other girl's going to get kicked out of school because she already failed it once. And this is a female-female erotica story. So as the story goes on, the tutor realizes that she has a attraction to the student that she's tutoring, and there are difficulties that occur throughout. One being she's at war with herself because she is from a Christian background and she feels conflicted about having feeling for someone of the same gender, and also she's also going to school with her ex-boyfriend, and him popping up every now and then is causing a lot of stress to her as well.
What's that book called?
This is in Claw Volume 1. It's an anthology that Furplant is selling. Unfortunately, it's already been sold out, but you can pre-order it on their website.
They've also got an ebook.
So what was your slice of life, though? The last one. Say.
So most recent slice of life I wrote was a story about of course it was anthropomorphic. This is a furrycon. I can talk about it. This is a story about a fox who was on the streets, essentially doing the shell game and begging to bring money home to feed his family's drug habit. It was based.
Oh gosh, that's so sad.
Yeah, and the sadder thing is that it
It
was
gets
based.
sadder.
I don't think you've read a lot of his work.
No.
It has a happy ending.
Oh, okay.
I changed it from the one where he's where he does something really bad, and it's
I
happier
could
now.
cry.
But no, what I was going to say is a sadder thing is that it was based on like a similar situation that I heard on like This American Life. It's obviously not the same story, but like I heard that and I was like, this kind of situation is something that I would love to write about, and I would love to understand what goes through these characters' heads and understand the struggles and motivations through it. So I did some research. I developed a scenario that wasn't necessarily it wasn't the same scenario. I did a new thing. I looked around and researched this and ended up with a new story that was something that was different, but still drew on real life struggles that people have to try to sort of show this to a different audience.
Right, and going off of what you said, sort of find that going about using real life events and like examining them in fiction, I feel like it's pretty common in fiction itself, but I feel like it's definitely present in the slice of life genre. I feel like this genre lends a lot of, it's able to help people like reading and writing helps them work through like what is going on in their daily lives and help them figure out like what should I do or how does someone else tackle this problem. And
Oh, this is wonderful. The funniest review I got for my slice of life, which is about college students figuring out their masters. I mean, right. We spend 2 books doing that. But
Yeah.
the funniest review I got was this person like, boy, she just goes on and on and on about this stupid, can't they just choose their stupid majors? You can totally tell that this author is in the middle of her own master's program, is having these problems, she's just talking, and I'm like, college was 20 years ago, so I really nailed what it felt like then.
What was those
But
two
I'm like,
for?
okay, no, but thanks for your input.
I was asking what the books were called.
The first one is called Mind Touch. Not touching my actual mind, but
But yeah, I find that with a lot of these slice of life stories, what they do is they take different components of life that the author knows or the author has seen around, different pieces of real life. Like I heard that story, I looked up and did research about what these people actually deal with, and then they take them and they put them into a new scenario, or they put them through, or they take their current scenario and add something new to it, so that they can put this work out that talks about this different thing, this regular life, but something or regular life where you can relate to it and you can see something different. And that different thing may help you understand something about the kind of person. It may help you understand things about yourself. There are lots of really good stories that combine different elements of just basic identity and talk about how those influence decisions through like a narrative story structure that's compelling to read.
And since slice of life is we choose like slices of life to portray on the page. I wanted to ask both of you, how do you go about choosing specific moments for your slice of life
Go for it.
story?
This is the hard one, though.
That's why I gave it to you.
I'll answer it too, but I gave it to both of you.
I hope you'll answer too.
Okay. Oftentimes, I'll just think of either an interesting perspective or an interesting scenario. Really, like with the story about the foxes on the street, it was that scenario, and then I was like, and then I took that scenario. Okay, this family drug habit, doing begging on the street. Change that up a bit. They're doing the clamshell game. They've got siblings who are almost in this life, and they're doing their best, trying to basically devote themselves into this as hard as possible to convince their family with the money that they get themselves to keep their siblings in school and from ending up in this life that they have.
You're so sad.
And these different elements that sort of evolve from this basic scenario. I think about you ask yourself, why does the character do this? Why in this scenario, what happens regularly that will change things for them? How does rain affect these characters on the street? Things like this will add in more like natural conflict and tension. Where in Slice of Life, you try to keep the conflict arcs understated or resolving and overlapping, but you still sort of need them for a narrative story structure. So it's really helpful for me to like look at that scenario and then start building on it, finding like the different components that fit in. Another tool that I use, which is actually what I was doing recently, brainstorming for an anthology that's coming up in 2 months that I'm hoping to write for. I had this idea where I wanted to write a character with a specific disability. And so what I did was I just pulled out my notes sheet and I said, okay, the character has this disability. Maybe they're missing a leg. Given that, what different options do I have? One, they have had maybe like a mangled leg or a leg that they couldn't use effectively since they were a child, in which case their struggles are going to be a lot different from if they lost their leg recently and they're learning to cope with it. With the second one, it's about dealing with their leg. There's almost no other way to do it, or no other way to have that not be a conflict for them. With the first one, you can sort of create a scenario where maybe they're dealing with something else, and you're just looking at it from a perspective of someone who's struggling with something else but has incorporated it into their daily life. And so I'm able to take that and maybe throw in a different interesting scenario and then try to conflate these perspectives. And I can work this story either from this certain aspect of the story I want and the different options that I have to incorporate the story and decide these things and figure out which sounds the best to me, or taking a scenario and building that out, really fleshing it out and seeing what parts of it work what way and how those affect the story in its final form.
Wow. Okay. All right, so, wait.
We've got more answers.
Wait. All right, so how many of you have recently defeated an invading alien fleet? Really? Okay,
Not recently.
fought off rampaging engineered dinosaurs. helped with like shut down a nuclear reactor that was going, to blow. Really? No, okay. That one was actually possible, so I'm like,
Fallout
wow.
3 did that.
So it's safe to say, right, that most of our lives are not like the stuff of epic novels, right? We're not epic novel heroes. When I write epic novels, I want to escape to a universe where I'm among super significant people who are doing really important stuff. But then when I want to write slice of life, it's to say, but wait, my actual life is full of real dramas that matter to me, and there's nothing wrong with that. So, this is like, big world-shattering, we're important, escapist stuff, but this is, but you know what? My actual life is pretty interesting to me, and everyone's life is interesting to them. So when I try to write slice of life, what I'm trying to do is get to the dramas that matter to all of us, because things matter to us, It does matter what degree we're going to end up with and what job we take, and, it matters to us when our dog dies and our grandmother dies and, we get sick. Those things have actual emotional consequence. So to me, my choice for slice of life is I'm ready to tell that kind of story. So I'm just going to pick something that has that kind of meaning, right? So now you have to answer.
Okay. For me, I feel like, of course, writing can be a very personal, trying to find the word, task. That doesn't sound right.
Endeavor.
But endeavor. See, that sounded like lofty and like dramatic.
Yeah,
Good.
dramatic.
But yeah, it's important. Like, so I typically use writing to sort of help think through problems I'm going through, or where I don't know where to go next. Like, for example, my story in Roar Volume 7, which is also on sale at the Fair Planet table, the story on the surface is just two recent college grads go for a hike, and they're trying to find this one landmark. But like, as you delve in the story, it's more about both of their issues going forth, like into the job market. One of them is unemployed, and he's done a bunch of internships, but yet he can't land a job. And the other one is a character who has a job lined up, but it's not at all what he wants to do, but it's a job and someone wanted him. And when I wrote that story, I was unemployed at the time, and I was sort of working through my issues and my insecurities about being unemployed and feeling sort of stuck at the moment. So typically when I write slice of life, and this could also work for any genre, I'm typically choosing moments that are significant to me, something that's poking at me, something that's important to me, and I'm turning it to fiction with some tidbits and some truth in there, in parts of myself.
Cool. Okay. Question?
Going off of what you said, I think a lot of people say that emotion kind of makes it difficult to write, because if you become emotionally attached to your writing, it becomes more difficult to see flaws. Do you think then slice of life does become a little bit more difficult to write because your own problems tend to leak in easier than, say, like an adventure novel, things like that? If you're more tempted to use moments from your own life and you become more emotionally attached to it, do you think that could be an issue?
I say, go ahead.
Oh, sorry. I feel like, on the one hand, I feel like with the emotional aspect, I feel like it's inevitable that the author is going to put portions of themselves into their work. Like, it is a part of them. But also in terms of making it like too close, or they're just writing out their life. This goes slightly outside our topic, but if you have like a trusted beta reader, they could probably help you with that. I mean, of course, if something something interests you, there chances are something is that same thing will interest other people. But at the same time, just because a story interests you doesn't mean it's necessarily interesting to other people. So if you show the writing to trusted beta readers, they should be able to help you in that regard, to show you either this is actually really interesting, I like where you're going with, or I know you're really on that one level, you're stuck in that video game and don't work out your problem in this entire story for a novel.
I want to quickly jump on a slightly different point from what you were talking about, and that's just the basic sentence there, that emotion makes stories more difficult to write, which is, in my opinion, bullshit. Emotion will make you more invested in putting the words down on the page. If you've got an investment into the idea that you're writing and you find the idea exciting, fun, interesting, then you're going to have a much easier time putting down words on the page and having them finish. It may be difficult to have them critiqued or edited afterwards, but it's always difficult. Your writing takes time and it takes effort, and it's hard to see that critiqued and edited. But emotion, I think, is always going to be a helpful thing if you're putting it into your writing.
I've had moments like that.
Oh, sorry, there are questions in the crowd.
But we'll finish what you're going to say then, because you're responding to him, then you. Okay, great.
But yes, I agree for the most part with what you said, but I will say that it is hard to physically write when you're bawling your eyes out.
That's not what I mean necessarily. Having an emotional investment or feeling or empathizing with the flow of your story it's like sort of a weird artsy way of saying it, but it's sort of the feeling like, oh yes, this is coming together. This feels great. This feels how I want it to be written. This is so emotional. Maybe not as much like you sobbing your brains out as you're writing, but even if you are, if that's your muse and you're sobbing your eyes out as you're pounding out words, if it works. Then that emotion, it helps you get the words out. And once the words are out, they're easier to edit, they're easier to do things with, and I think that's a net positive.
But don't get too attached to being in the flow all the time, because most of the time writing is tedious and exhausting, and it takes a long time, and you will labor over things and think they're horrible, and your readers will not be able to tell between the stuff that you were flowing and the stuff you were like, oh God, every word is pain in my brain. So it can make you self-conscious to think that you have to be that way. You have, like most of us, it's just keep going until the end, and that'll get you to the end, and the reader won't notice how much effort it took. All they notice is that, wow, this sounds good, and you're like, really?
I love those moments, but she's telling the exact truth. More often than not, it's the tedium.
It really
but
is.
Those emotional moments, when I can put that down, it feels great.
I know we have some questions in the crowd. We had you, and I see two others here.
Go ahead.
Order.
Point to the person you
okay.
saw first.
Okay, so I think I saw you first, and then Rechin, and then you with the Sylveon ears.
Yeah, in a furry world, slice of life gives you a unique opportunity to describe what life in that non-existent world would be like. You would write something like he sat down, being careful to put his tail into the tail hole of the chair. He picked the nicks out of his fur, stuff like that. That would be typical for that, but is exotic to us.
That's true.
Yeah, I feel like slice of life is definitely, and furry, they definitely lend themselves to each other, because in a way it's slice of life. Some slice of life, it's very we understand, we kind of understand some daily lives of some people, but with furry, okay, we kind of understand because we're all furries, but we don't necessarily understand the physicality of putting your tail through the hole in the chair and having to watch out for doors, or walking into the room and being like, yes, there was definitely a skunk in here 5 minutes ago.
I think too that they offer a really good way to emphasize certain aspects with species, or use species based off of people's preconceptions, or eschew those preconceptions. I had my story in this anthology, Species Wolves. I had a story there about a character who's struggling with loneliness. They had a crushing 9-to-5 job, just sat every day on the train, trying not to bump into their neighbors, hoping. Yeah.
You're right, it's so sad.
And
Did this one have a happy ending?
Yes, it did.
Okay.
It did. But yeah, so it was a story with a wolf about loneliness, and one night he was like watching the news, and he saw the death of the last of this rare species of feral wolf, and them talking about like how the wolf acted after it had lost this other wolf, and he was like, I'm not going to be that. I've got to find people. I've got to find a pack and join it. And so he went out. He joined a crochet club. And,
Nice.
Yep.
It's so uplifting.
And
Right after the whole extinction.
he went ahead and he tried to, and he put himself in these situations. He fixed troubles that he had been having with paying rent, with a fine that had come down, and
Crocheting saved his life.
but yeah, it was the using the wolf in that scenario. It's like the animal that fits, and it's very relatable from the perspective of viewing the animal type and feeling, okay, this wolf is feeling this way in this relatable sense, and it's understandable from like the pack mentality, from needing family structure and needing all of that, but it's also something that's very human and very relatable to us as people. So the use of the wolf gave a sort of very easy window into this need that everyone still has.
I believe we should.
So we're writing about stories about people in situations, and people in situations that happen in real life. So how much do you do of researching people who are in those situations and how they actually feel? Assuming that you're not writing based on yourself, but on some other character in some other situation, how much do you look for research on or testimonies from those people?
You gotta do it. That's just part of research. You have to research everything you don't know. And things that you think you know, you should probably double check.
Last month, I posted on the Furry Writers Guild Slack and the Furry Writers Guild Telegram group saying, hey, does anyone do archery? Do any of you guys do archery? Then I posted on the Maryland Furry group, does anyone do archery? Then I posted on like an otter group, does anyone do archery?
Oh my gosh,
and,
someone do archery.
Yes, I found like 2 people who did competitive archery and just grilled them about the processes, about the tournaments that they went through for a not even main plot archery part of a story that I was writing, just to make sure that this felt like normal, natural life that they were moving through. This story also had an aromantic main character, and I luckily didn't have to search all over the place for that. I have a friend who's aromantic, and I just spent hours talking with her and going back and forth about this character and about making sure that they were sort of an accurate representation of, if not them, an aromantic person or some kind of aromanticism.
Yes, it's generally just a good good rule to just if the character you're writing is a bit or even completely not like you, there are like literally like billions of people in the world, and so just
Oh, that was so awesome.
just there have
It was
been
the delivery. That's great. Okay, now keep going.
but yes, but yeah, there are online resources for like forums or just articles online for people who have lived these experiences that you have not lived, or going through experiences that you have not experienced yourself. I mean, sure, like if you have the experience yourself, then awesome, like that's a good tool, but definitely bank on the knowledge of others.
And make no assumptions, right? So,
Right.
I have a 10-year-old daughter, and I was once a 10-year-old girl, and she's telling me about how much she hates school, and she hates her teacher, and she wishes she could throw her teacher out the window. And I'm listening to this and going, oh my God, she's so violent. Why is she saying all these things? How can she hate school so much? And this is like seriously bothering me as a parent, right? And then I'm going through a bunch of files trying to organize things and throw out some old stuff. And I find a wanted poster with my 6th grade photo on it, which I had created. And I was wanted, now I had written this out, right, for getting my teacher drunk and setting the school on fire with a reward of like $1 million. And I had drawn myself as a little mongoose, like with a brand, a burning brand, like setting fire to stuff. And I'm like, okay, so apparently, you know, many decades later, I have forgotten how violent I was as a child, and this is totally normal. So even the things you think you know, you should probably double check.
So did the burning of the school come first, or the getting the teacher
No, the
drunk?
teacher drunk first.
Okay, so they'd be stumbling drunk and couldn't leave the school?
I don't know. Oh, my God. Oh, and I was armed and dangerous, and the weapon I had was a net. And I showed this to my daughter, and she's like, that's a stupid weapon. And I'm like, yes, it really is. Okay, so yeah, research is important.
But you don't also need to get yourself caught in the weeds sometime. Like with that wolf story that I was mentioning, the only real research I did for that was a bit of asking my sister what crochet was like and how I did that. And after that, it was just sort of everything was sort of character emotion, different character ideas, and I didn't really need that much research otherwise to go on off that. Some things require shallow research, some require heavy research, and you sort of got to just figure out for yourself what the problem needs.
Right. Definitely, of course, research, do research, but at the end of the day, you need to sit down and write the darn story.
It is
Yes.
true.
And
Alright,
I believe we had
Sylvie on yours.
Sylvie on yours.
I had 2 questions. One, I've tried for about a year to try to find the Furry Writers Guild, and I have no clue how to make an account or whatever for it.
furrywritersguild.org. At the top right, there's a link to the forum. You can go to the forum. There's a login and register. It's just a very typical WordPress kind of forum kind of thing.
Could you repeat that again? That was really fast.
Sorry. I talk fast. Furry Writers Guild,
Okay.
or I think it's just .com.
Just if you put it in Google, it'll come up.
Yeah, it's a .com.
Yes, .com. And there's a forum page link on like the top right, I think, or in the app it might be a drop down, but there should be a link that says forum. If you click on that, then you can log in and register. If you just go to like the main page there, it talks about joining the Furry Writers Guild. All that is getting to vote in the book awards. You can participate fully in the Furry Writers Guild by going onto the forum, just creating an account, and checking out the other writers and the resources that we have there.
How do you get on the Slack?
The Slack, yes, that's a question that I definitely remember how to do from 2 years ago. But I think that there is in the announcements, like if you go to the announcements page, I think pinned up is the Furry Writers Guild Slack. Or if you just search Slack in there and keep on scrolling until eventually you find something with a link.
Yeah.
But yeah.
What was your other question?
My other question was, I've never written a book. I mean, I haven't published or anything, but I've done like little writings here and there. And I want to start taking that big step. Well, that one step ended up being 3 steps, because now I, for some reason, have 3 ideas of books that could be in like a series. But what I'm scared about is if I have one written out and they don't like it, but they let's say 2 others books I have more experience and time and understanding to write the other 2 better. Would I just go back and rewrite the first book that I wanted to do again so that they like it, or do I just keep proceeding and pretend that first one never happened?
I was afraid of this exact thing. I had this exact problem. I had a story like 5-6 years ago when I was first like seriously sitting myself down and committing myself to write. It was this long epic about two otters going on this adventure, and I was really excited about it. It was a great idea, and I still think it's a fun, good idea. With like the structure of the story and some of the different ideas that I had incorporated in it. And what I did was I just took it chapter by chapter and posted the chapters as a serial on every art writing site I could find. So far it had the best results for me, and I had some people commenting on it, and that kept me going, and I kept on writing it. I went for like I think 24 chapters before I eventually like started getting distracted by some short story projects, and then those short story projects turned into published short stories, and I got accepted into things. I started a novel project, but I still like that idea that I had before about those otters going on the adventure, and it's still up there on my old SoFurry page, and I don't regret having written it when I wrote it.
I know that I think it's just inevitable that as you grow as a writer, your prose is going to improve. So
Or just change.
Or just change. Yeah. But in terms of, I'm not exactly sure what sort of writing or publication goals that you have. But if you just want to write the story for the sake that this is a story you have inside you and you really and you enjoy writing, then if it like it should appeal to you at the end of the day. If you're like, don't. So if it appeals to you the most, then I don't think you have to necessarily worry for that. It might be a little different if you put publishers into the mix, because there might be sales you have to worry about. But if it's just the story that, I just say at the end of the day, write the story that you want to write.
There's always going to be old work, and the old work will still be out there, and people will still be reading it, and some people will love it, and it's out there and you can't do anything about it. So you just have to be resigned to, the fact that it's that or not. Write and give people things, because you'll always be changing.
Also, you can be sure that whenever you finish a story, you'll be able to find a new idea that makes you excited. If you're worried about putting down this idea that you're excited about before you think you have the skills for it, you don't need to be. You'll put it down and it'll be great. It'll be what you have the skills for, and it'll be a good story. But when you're better, you might be putting down a different idea, and that might be better. Every author has stories that are weaker, stories that are stronger, but they're all cool ideas, and they always get new cool ideas. You're always excited to see what comes next.
That was so uplifting.
This is pretty off topic, but it does relate to something that was spoken about yesterday.
That really is off topic. But
yeah.
Continue, I'm curious.
In regards to posting content, posting like chapter by chapter versus posting an entire finished piece, even if it is multi-chaptered, does it really just come down to personal preference so long as you still have the work checked? Because I do know that we talked about yesterday, posting it, getting that reaction of people seeing it, and then it kind of fizzling out because you've pretty much already gotten the reaction you wanted to. So would you recommend holding off, getting everything together, and then posting it just even it's by chapter when it's all completed?
Do you want money?
Yeah.
Okay, there's almost no money in serials.
But there's improvement in serials.
I guess.
If you can't sell your work yet, then serials on like a site like SoFurry are a good way to say. And I understand what you're saying, and it sounds like conflicting advice, but really what you do is you treat the chapter as its own finished product. You use the chapter as the goal. You don't share the chapter before you're done with it. You don't offer teasers for the chapter. You put the chapter up when you're finished with it after you've done some editing, maybe sent it to a friend to beta read. And then you get the validation of having views, maybe a favorite or two. They'll trickle in after you post for a while. And then maybe once you've gone on enough, you'll feel confident enough to move on to short stories, or maybe even a novel project that you don't want to serialize and you want to make money off of?
Well, everyone's different. Like, I have a friend who used to serialize stuff, and she's like, well, I stopped because when I started serializing work, I would get enough validation from that I never wanted to do anything else with it. And that didn't work for me. Well, other people are like, I love serialization. And readers are also up and down about serials. Some of them love serials, some of them don't love it. You know, it's really personal, I guess. I don't do it anymore because I'm addicted to money. But some people use Patreon for it and do okay, but you have to work pretty hard at that, I think.
It worked for me until it stopped working.
Yeah, that's exactly what
Yes.
happened. Now we have 5 minutes.
Another panel?
No,
I
it's
think
until
we were at
6:30.
Are you crazy?
It's what I got in my
But the
calendar.
schedule said it was from 6. Really? Okay, well then we're good. Carry on.
Awesome.
Like, great.
So, have you ever serialized something?
The closest I've gotten to that was back in my fanfiction.net days.
But this is what I'm talking about. This is what I'm talking about with me too, because this is a story that's way worse than anything that I would write today, that I would not want to like send to a publisher or anything, but it was a fun idea that I enjoyed, and I was able to use that experience to both get the validation to keep on improving and keep on posting it while still having myself continue to write. I think that the comments that I got on that story are what kept me writing and kept me from quitting early when I didn't have the skills sort of built up that I do now.
All right, so I will give you a nuanced answer as opposed to a flippant answer, which I've been doing, for which I apologize. But it's the Pocky.
The Pocky changes a person.
So, serializing content that general broad audiences would be good with is a bad financial decision, and it's usually a bad creative decision because broadly appealing books, people like to read them as novels, so they don't really keep up with them as serials. They don't respond to them. They don't do that. Really niche, strange projects can make more money as serials than they do as actual novels because people don't go to novels for weird niche experiences usually. So I did like 12 series. The serialized novels that I did that were for books that have done well as novels in retail were okay as serials and people donated for them, but it wasn't anything special. But the weird niche ones made more money as serials than they do now as novels continually year after year because the serial experience was interactive and the readers started interacting with each other and with the fiction. And that was a very strange and special kind of situation, and I don't see it happening very much. So it helps to have expectations set properly for serials. Like, okay, if you're doing like a general slice of life thing, you know, don't expect a billion comments or anything. Whereas you're doing something weird and quirky that might be more engaging in some other way, you might get more response for that. I mean, I worry that people who serialize, they'll get like 2 likes and a comment, and they'll be like, oh God, I'm not cut out for this, nobody loves me, and then they give up because they're like, why don't I get any comments? I feel ignored. And you know, the truth is, even for retail novels, you'll get several thousand people reading before someone posts a review. And that's just the way it is. So I don't want you to get discouraged if you decide to serialize and there's no activity, because sometimes there's just not, often, really.
Well, what I was framing too was the difference between sort of the professional and very inexperienced person trying to like get better. I think serials are a good way to try to improve your writing technique if you aren't quite there yet. If you are at the point where you would make a novel, sell it, and it just wouldn't work because
You're super brave. Oh my gosh. When I was first starting, the thought of just throwing my stuff out there so that hundreds of strangers could read it and comment it would terrified me.
But the thing is, the comments are what kept me going. I only ever got like 1 or 2 comments, like 5, 6 likes on chapters until I started getting to the later chapters and things started getting better with my writing. And the 1 or 2 comments were always what kept me going and sort of gave me the drive to improve. And now I agree that if I were to write something now, and I've got a novel project right now. I wouldn't dream of serializing it because I know that that this project is going to be much better in a solid form, and I can sell it to a publisher. I don't think that I could sell that idea that I was writing before to a publisher. I don't think that I could really sell that as a product online in full. But it was vital for me improving, and I loved having that around to be able to use to improve.
You have a comment?
No, I was just
No.
looking at you guys while you talked.
Yeah.
You're so polite.
Yeah, I think that as soon as you get into like that sort of stage, you're exactly right about those differences, especially monetarily and especially with fan participation. I think that I was more referring to like using it as like a tool for motivation when you're just starting out and you don't really have the experience behind you. You haven't really like gotten something published. You've never gotten paid for your work. You've never been able to do that.
As long as you're not the kind of person to get discouraged that you don't get a ton of comments.
Yeah.
If your reaction to it is like, wow, one person liked me, then that's you should definitely do that. But if your response to that is, wow, one person liked me, then you probably shouldn't, right? You know, you have to know yourself, what you're. I don't like getting one comment. It makes me sad, so that wouldn't work for me. But it worked for him, so different people. How about you? Are you a one person or one person?
I think I'm more of a one person.
That's so sweet.
Yeah.
Expectations change a lot as you get experience, though. Like when you're just starting out, the idea of someone reading something that you wrote and liking it is, holy shit, this person really liked it. Wow, I can't believe it. I wrote something and this person wants to read the next chapter? What? I was baffled. Sorry, go ahead. I interrupted you.
Oh no, my comment was I got a comment.
Right.
But yeah, I noticed that like you were mentioning later on, like as you went further on into your serial, you started getting more comments till you're closer to the end. And I feel like it's easier. I feel like it would be easier to get more comments on a story if you put out a complete work.
Though also, it is much more crushing if you put out a complete work and aren't able to get comments than if you start off a serial and aren't able to get comments.
My book only has one review. I still do that, so.
But yeah, I'm working on a novel project right now, and I'm doing exactly like you said. Like I don't think that I'd be able to do it as a serial, and I think that a serial kind of fiction isn't really right for me anymore. But I thought it was right for me when I was sort of getting better.
And if you're going to do a serial, it helps to do a serial. End it on some cliffhanger, like every time, have it like the way that make people discuss it. Oh my God, what's going to happen next? And it creates a different format than like a novel written as a novel. So like the serials I've written as serials read very differently when you read them all at once than the novels that I serialized. And the novels I serialized never do as well as the ones where, oh my gosh, this cliffhanger is incredibly crazy. Why is she doing this to us? And I would do that every single time I posted, and it was just, how many chapters does Spots have? 400
Lord.
something?
Lord, so many.
And and it was military science fiction, so every time it ended, it was like, oh my God, it's getting worse. Oh my God, they're in the middle of a battle. Oh my God, did that person die? She hasn't told us. Why did she stop? So that was a great experience as a serial. It's an okay experience as a book, but it doesn't duplicate the serial experience, which is time bound, interactive, and engaging, right?
I was actually thinking. I feel like a lot of serialization happened like back in the older days when, like in the 1900s. Yeah, and I was thinking nowadays, like we have something like Netflix. Like instead of waiting until next week for the new episode, we have an entire season in one go. So I think I could potentially make it harder for a market for serials. But I do like the idea that was mentioned earlier of if you have something that is very like niche, niche. I'm not sure how it's
You're
gonna.
good either way.
There are some Sofari authors who make bank on serial fiction. I think Of the Wilds does serial stuff, and he does it really well. But yeah.
No, but I think when you think about TV, it really is excellent, like example of serial fiction. Like when something is being released on a schedule and it has fans, and you can't make it release faster, and then they have the experience of, we don't know what happens next. We can't figure it out for another week. We've got to talk to each other about it because it's really exciting. You know, that sense of a community that's discussing something, and they're all having the same experience of wanting to know what happens next and not
Right.
being able to, is a distinct quality about serials, which you can't duplicate with a book. And if you're gonna do serials, that's like an exciting thing to aim for. Like, let me try to give people that experience and see what happens. And I think that's good.
I think a great example of where this sort of dichotomy fell apart. I shouldn't spoil things, but at the end of a recent Walking Dead season, a season of The Walking Dead on AMC, they had this scene where there's a bad guy and he's walking around some main characters and he's like, I'm just gonna kill someone to prove I'm tough, and he like leans back and he's about to do it, and then it cuts off to cliffhanger. The comic had done the comic had come out already, and it had shown this scene as like this brutal, visceral scene with this whole thing happening, and then it ended on this like rough note. And the comic did this very well, but the TV executives were like, no, in this serial format we need this cliffhanger, and it sort of broke the story and tried to force this other format into the specific TV serial format, and that kind of caused it to fail. They're like you said, they're two very different formats, and different things work in them differently.
So that was a total tangent off of Slice of Life, but any more questions? Are we awake?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, good.
If not,
It's more like an idea I've had than a question, but well, maybe I can ask this. Have you ever had, say you have a series, has it ever occurred to you to have kind of like a cool idea to show off like characters that are going to be in like the next Slice of Life or something? Say like one book, they're working as a waiter or waiters, and they're happen to host or take this specific person that seemed to spark their interest to their table, and then the next book that you see that same scenario, but in the person they're taken to the person that's going to eat theirs point of view instead of the other way, like a cameo kind of thing.
Time-honored thing in multiple genres, particularly romance, where you know the couple in the next book is like the secondary characters in the first book, and it just keeps. That's a great idea. Many people use it. Go for it. Yeah.
or were you talking specifically about having book one be in one character's point of view, and then having book two have the events of book one, but through a different character's point of view?
No, it's more like another example could be like they're going to buy a cup of coffee, and that person happens to owns a coffee shop, and they go, oh, I like this, and they like, I think I took that person to their table once, and it's just like they don't know them personally, and then you go to the next book, and it's like having like cameos or introductions to these characters, but they don't know each other personally.
Yeah, that's
Right.
Now, you framed that as introducing them in the story before they come into play. Oftentimes, I think what happens more, and what writers like to do more, is to take their second book and think like, what are some characters that I can use from the first book? So instead of saying, I've got these characters that I want to do for my second book, let's put them in the first book. It's saying more like, I've got this interesting idea of how I fleshed out the background for this character. I think that they would make an interesting plot by doing this or interacting with this character. That's happened, I think, a lot with authors, and you can do the first idea as well. I think the more common is sort of the reverse of that.
It's all good. As long as you let dead people stay dead.
Yes.
This is my worst cameo ever is Vaniel in the Valdemar series by Mercedes Lackey, who dies beautifully and tragically in historical record and then reappears as a ghost to save the universe 9 books later. And I'm like, yes, we all really love him. I still love him. I would love to see more. He's dead! Let someone else have the spotlight, please! Okay. Oh my gosh. Dead!
Did you at least bring them back in like a flashback?
Well, flashback, okay, but
See, you
but
take-
actual ghosts saving the universe again.
But ghosts couldn't touch anything.
You
Well, it
take
was-
that death and you
they
render
use
it
magic,
pointless. Is the thing,
Okay,
yeah.
so
Oh.
no. So don't do that. But,
Necromancy.
or
Okay.
you do that, do it well somehow. I don't know how, but someone might,
Necromancy?
you know.
Biggest perpetrators are superhero universes.
Oh gosh.
Yeah.
Or,
Stay dead.
Or it's just
or have you guys seen the Kingsman movies or read the graphic novels?
Oh boy.
No, I haven't
I
seen the
haven't, I
second
haven't
one,
seen
so
the
shut
second
up.
one.
Okay.
You haven't seen the second one?
No, so shut
It's
up.
good.
But yeah, in the superhero movie,
Three exceptions.
they will literally invent. Well, the worst thing one thing I hate even more than resurrecting characters is creating new characters for like 10 minutes so they can kill them 10 minutes later and cop out of killing someone important. Because killing this minor character is they want to have the emotional impact. They want to do something. They want to have some death in this big fight scene. So 10 minutes later, it's I'm Weasel Man. I have all the powers of being a weasel. And then they go into
Are
the fight.
weasels significant?
No, not particularly. And they go into this fight, and there's all these lasers being thrown around, super weapons, and Weasel Man's just there being a weasel, and he gets like shot through the face with a laser, and you're supposed to be like, oh no, a superhero has died.
It's red
But
shirting.
Yeah, it's red shirting. Yeah, exactly.
Oh,
But
yeah.
they name the red shirt and give them like a special power and try to make you like them for like 10 minutes before killing them off. It's yeah.
I have things to say about the X-Men movies.
Wait, no. Wait, are they spoilers? You don't want to spoil?
No, they're
Okay.
they're not. I mean, that happened where it's like I was introduced 10 minutes ago. I'm dead now. Yeah, but I've also going back.
I was born to die.
Yes, but going slightly on slice of life. Who here saw X-Men Apocalypse? Okay.
Wait, Apocalypse and Run.
Okay, so there is a scene where these teenage mutants in the 80s apparently, yeah, I was thinking that too. They go to the mall, and then we cut back to a scene like later on where they're like something happened and they're like driving back to Xavier's school for gifted youngsters. And I'm like, wait, we missed the part. Like, wait, forget about this apocalypse plot. I wanted to see teenagers with mutant powers in the 80s going to the mall.
Did they have like those jelly footwear things? Do you remember those? They were made out of plastic. They were horribly uncomfortable.
It's more like a
I know what
90s
you're
thing.
talking about.
At least that's when I saw them.
No. They made a revival. Sorry. Oh my God, I'm
Wait, I
old.
think I know what you're talking about. The thing is, I'm from the 90s, so that's scary.
Yes.
Anyone remember Morph from X-Men, the animated series?
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, he was killed off just after he was introduced and then brought back to life a couple seasons later.
God.
So he's like the trifecta of what you've been talking about.
I mean, like, killed off before they're reintroduced is explicitly, killed off 10 minutes after they're introduced is explicitly for the purpose of being able to have a permanent death and pretending like there's an impact.
Or they're killed to demonstrate a thing.
Right.
Like, see, this is what happens. Our heads get blown up because we disobey.
Well, that's what I mean with like an impact. It's supposed to be an emotional thing. A death is supposed to carry weight. The thing is, when you're consuming media, the deaths that carry weight are the ones that are that you connect with or you relate with. You see this person and then you hear about them. You like get in their head. They're often the main characters or the secondary characters. It's really tragic, and death is an awful thing. But when you're watching a war movie, you don't tear up over the casualties that are falling off screen. You tear up when you see like the main character struggling through the trenches and then get hit with a mortar, and it's awful, and it's a really like horrifying, gut-wrenching thing. But then like because you like relate to them. And like introducing them 10 minutes before they die is them trying to give you the chance to relate to them, but not actually doing it to cop out of killing someone that you would actually care about.
Did you see Sergeant Stubby?
I know that
don't
movie.
think so.
I know.
No.
Is that
of
the
it.
dog about the, like that pit bull or
It's
the
about
bulldog?
the World War I dog hero.
Oh my god, I need to
I
see
haven't
that.
seen the animated yet.
It is.
It's
It is
good.
the single. I think it might be the only war documentary for children, animated war documentary for children I have ever heard of in my life, and it's fantastic. They did a great job. They explained the war in like in a way that would be explicable to children, you know, and they showed maps and gave you actually history, and then they actually demonstrated things like people preparing for gas attacks and, you know, the effects of gas attacks, you know, people dead, not like gore or anything like, but actually like in the trenches with the wire and the shooting and stuff like that. And then all the things that the dog did were real, even the most ridiculous ones that you're like, no, that can't possibly be true. Like he found a spy by biting it and then holding it there by biting it until like the rest of the soldiers could come and arrest him. It was like, what? So it was really fantastic, and you know, I'm like, war documentary for children about a dog hero. This is great. You gotta see it. Sergeant Stubby.
Did the dog have a gas mask?
Yes.
Okay, good.
The dog historically had a gas mask, and it's true. In the movie, they're like, the French villagers created one for him because they liked him so much, and they made him a little jacket that he could hang all his little his insignia. And it's true, and they have a photo in the Wikipedia of like the dog wearing his. It was wild. It was great.
And then the one guy dies. And, you're
Yeah,
like,
and he
they
does
did
die.
It. They're not gonna.
And
They
it
did.
does die, and he was built up from the very beginning. So you're
Right.
very sad when he dies. It's very sad.
Exactly.
I feel like there can be like there's a sort of like opposite ends of like this character was like well fleshed out for a very long time, so like when their death comes, it's like it's an emotional impact, and then you have in the middle here where it's not impactful, where it's like, hi, I'm introduced for 10 minutes and then I die, and then you get like snippets like I haven't actually seen the movie myself, but Titanic, like
Good movie.
like the musicians, like you didn't see them really, and then it's like the part where it's like, I think it was the part like, it was an honor playing with you tonight, everyone, and then they're gonna die. Like, I know you have known me for all of 5 seconds, and I'm so sad now.
That was historical.
Now, this isn't to say you can't have deaths that are impactful on a minor character that was introduced recently, but those deaths are because they are impactful to someone else that you have a direct emotional weight in or investment in. For example, I think I'm not going to talk about any specifics, but Game of Thrones has scenarios where a character is introduced to rescue another character or to offer another character the guidance they need, and then they are killed like 10 minutes later.
Like everyone
And
in that
it's-
series.
But it does have an emotional impact because it isn't necessarily about you being told to relate to this other character. It's about you continuing to relate with the main character who feels this hopelessness and this desperation at having this chance ripped away from them.
I think the point is context makes everything have meaning, you know, and not just death, but everything else. So
Cameo.
Can you talk more about like the market and marketability of literary slice of life?
literary slice of life.
Yeah.
Oh God.
It's marketable in academia.
Right.
Now, if you're talking about the slice of life that most of us write, that's plenty marketable.
If you can get it into year's best American fiction.
Yes, basically. Then you're golden.
Yeah.
And they'll probably pay you like $50, and you could buy a pizza.
You could buy like 3 pizzas maybe,
Right.
with like 2 toppings.
Well, it depends on how fancy this pizza is. You know,
You
the
gotta treat
pizza in
yourself.
San Francisco would probably be $50, but the pizza where I live would probably be $15. So in addition to the marketability, you should be writing literary slice of life in a place with a low cost of living.
$50 a month or less.
There you go.
Something from MCA Hogarth and Significant Other shit on literary type of life.
For an hour and a half.
Seriously, I wrote some for English classes, and I didn't think they were bad. And in fact, I think one of them made me cry while I was writing it. So but I cried a lot, as you have noticed.
I wrote a story about a boy who saved a dog from a fire and left his mom to die.
What? What is wrong with you?
I've heard worse.
The mom was bad, and the mom was an awful person, but the media caught onto the story and was like demonizing him, and
Yes.
he's just there like, I can't talk about it. I don't want to talk about this, but he knows inside that he thinks he did the right thing because the dog was the only thing there to comfort him.
What?
Oh
This
my
is
God.
completely self-absorbed, young child.
No,
Oh my
it makes sense. It
gosh.
makes sense. It was the only thing that loved the boy while the mom did not.
Yes.
So if you think about it, are you going to save the one that loved you and cherished you, or the one that pretty much used you as a step stool?
It was a tough story, and this is why I wrote it for literary fiction, for literary slice
go.
of life. It was a flash fiction piece, I think, around 700 or 800 words.
I do have one question.
Yes.
This is sadly back to the whole death thing, but
I write that.
but it's like, you know how you said don't like kind of try to avoid the whole hi, I'm someone special 10 minutes later death. Would it be alright to, because it kind of got that, I never watched the Stubby movie, but it sounds like they had this character that helped build up another character the whole way through, and then what happens like towards either the middle or towards the end, they died. So could that maybe like in that turn their death not only be significant for the writer but also be significant for the character that you realize the main focus is actually on? Say like their death, they make a meaning out of it, and
Yeah, it was. It
absolutely.
worked. It worked in the movie.
The more things that you can do with your fiction, the stronger it becomes. If you've got a scene that has emotional impact in like multiple different ways, and it also like it's like the very typical writing advice of every scene should advance either character, plot, or setting or established setting. But the more of those that it does, the better. And it's similar here, where this action has a emotional impact because of your investiture with the character. And the impact has an emotional impact because of your investment with a different character due to their relationship with that character. Those are two separate things that are both perfectly fine to sort of target with this emotional hit. But they work together great to make it an even like stronger blow.
This is why I like to write long. I like to write long so that I have time to give everyone lots and lots of time with everyone who's important, so that by the time you get to book 5, the fact that one character decided to say one line of dialogue in a different language, you're like, oh, that's so meaningful, because you've been with them so long that you know those things. And yet, if you're like, you try to explain it to someone else, they're like, what? It's like you have to have lived through it with them for so many 800, 900, 1,200 pages. It's like so real to me, you know. And I like that kind of fiction to read, you know. That's why I don't write short stories. I don't get emotionally invested enough in short stories to be able to enjoy them. You know, I like really long stories, really long stories, because of that. It's the emotional payoff, and the longer you wait, the better it is.
I feel like I think it works better if the person that is going to die if they are also a character, and they don't solely exist to make another character like reveal a part of themselves or feel bad, which I feel like has happened in some recent superhero movies.
And it's not just dying, it's, their first kiss. If it's their first kiss after 6 books, it means a lot more than it's the first kiss in the first chapter,
Now, so you say that, and that's a very good point. But when I'm working on brainstorming for a story, I will say, I need this to happen to my character, so I need someone to do it. I'm going to create this person to do that thing to my character. And that isn't a bad thing for you guys to do, but you have to remember that this other character should be like maybe not a human being, a anthropomorphic otter.
Obviously.
An anthropomorphic otter.
A river otter.
Yes, a river otter, not a sea otter. And that they should have all of the feelings and background and depth that a anthropomorphic river otter has. And
This is such a species.
and that sea otters don't. But what I'm saying is that you can create your character to do a task, but you need to make sure that they are a rounded character with facets to them that make them sort of seem to accomplish that task while acting on their own with agency as themselves.
5 minutes, Jan.
Yeah, I was just about to say that. So we have time for 1 or maybe 2 quick ones. You had your hand.
Okay, 3 things real quick. First, significant other, I can recommend a good therapist. Second, killing off the hero's mentor, that's been done a lot. Star Wars does it all the time. Third, TV tropes of a page called Disposable Woman, which is about killing off the hero's wife or girlfriend to motivate him. And yeah, that's probably something that is best avoided.
Cheap tactics. That's what we're
I
talking
believe that's
about.
also called fridging.
Fridging, yeah.
The older I get, the more disturbing I find the constant deaths of mentors. I'm
Yeah.
like, okay, now that I'm moving into that role, can I stay alive for longer than a few chapters?
I think the
No.
reason for it is because writers are
Sorry.
afraid of having someone better at things than the main character. So they're like, okay, we can't have this and not have it be an antagonistic relationship, so better get rid of this guy. So
No.
that
I can confidently say that, my child has more energy than I'll ever have.
Right.
So she'll always be better at sword fighting than I am.
No, I'm not saying it's a good thing. I'm saying that's probably why writers do it.
I know, don't
Yeah,
do that.
don't do it.
We want to live, okay?
Sorry,
Roll
next
could
time
shift.
you're dying.
The role could shift later on. Like they could be a mentor for the first book or 2, and then later on,
Appear.
appear.
That would be cool.
Like Gandalf.
Yeah.
All right, any last questions? Are we good? Are you guys happy?
Yeah.
You're awake? Okay, good.
It's Anthrocon.
Yeah.
All right,
I
well,
need coffee.
do you guys have business cards?
I don't.
I do not.
Okay, well, I have business cards. So if you'd like one of mine, you can come get one.
All right. Thank you all very much for coming.
Thank you.